Hi, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to look at what I think is one of the best, most flexible, ultralight and compact cameras you can get for hiking long distances. It is the Sony HX99 and it is tiny. This is the bag I use for a cheap little bag of Amazon, and in here I've got the camera and I've got 2 or 3 spare batteries, so enough no matter how far you're going to hike, and it weighs very little indeed. It is absolutely tiny, weighs 246 grams including the battery, and it has absolutely loads of really good features. So we're not going to get into too much of a technical review. This is aimed at hikers, casual photographers, people who just want to pop a small camera in their pocket and go for a walk. And the good thing with this kind of size camera, it's so small, there's no reason not to take it. So I found with some of my bigger cameras, I just wasn't taking them out very much, especially long distance hikes. I didn't want to take the weight. So this camera solves all those issues because it really is pocket sized and extremely light. Now Sony seemed to have abandoned the HX series. They did release them quite frequently, but the 99 is the last in the series. You can still buy it new for between £400 and £450, but there are quite a few good used deals. I got this one absolutely mint condition from a camera company online for £219, which included the battery, the charger, but no box or anything. But it is absolutely mint condition, and you do get an awful lot of camera for the money. Most cameras that are aimed at consumers and reasonably affordable do have sacrifices made in certain areas. So the sacrifice with this camera, being the size that it is that the sensor is very small. So it's the kind of sensor you'd get in an action camera or other small cameras. So it's going to limit it in low light, and it's going to limit its dynamic range. So if you're a really serious landscape photographer, this is not the camera for you. You can get cameras that are pretty small with much bigger sensors that would be up your street. What this camera does extremely well is everything. Because of that small sensor, you can pack a lot of features onto it that you couldn't with a bigger sensor. So for example, this camera, despite its size, has a 24 to 720 millimeter zoom lens. So I will show you what that looks like in practical terms with a short video clip. As you can see, it's one of those cameras you can get out if you spot a bit of wildlife or a distant view, and you can just zoom all the way into it, and obviously every single setting in between you can take advantage of for photos or video. Now the camera shoots 18 megapixel photos, so perfectly decent size photos, and it does shoot RAW as well, which gives you more flexibility to edit them afterwards. You can just shoot JPEG straight out of it, and you can just share them via your mobile phone straight to social media. One of the interesting things with this camera is actually when you're in photo mode, the photos are slightly squarer than you normally get on Sony cameras. Sony cameras are normally like 16:9, but I think on here to get the full 18 megapixels they're 4:3, which actually makes them a lot easier to share on places like Instagram, where they tend to have a squarer format, and also things like YouTube community posts, they want a squarer format as well. So it's actually quite handy with that, but just bear in mind that you might want to crop the top and bottom images to match in with a kind of traditional landscape photo. Despite its small size, it is packed with a load of stuff that Sony packs into its better cameras. It's got pretty solid autofocus that includes eye focus, and you can register faces onto the device. So if you've got a few children, you can register their faces onto the device, and you can even set a preference which one it focuses on if they're all in frame. Very clever and very smart. I found the autofocus to be pretty good and pretty reliable. They've also managed to cram in a flash, and even better than that, for really bright days when you don't want to use the rear screen, they've actually put in a little digital viewfinder as well. So you can still hold it up to your eye and on bright sunny days see the image. Not the sharpest and highest resolution little EVF you're ever going to get, but the fact that they've crammed one onto the device is really impressive. It's definitely a useful little feature. Now with the rear screen, it's quite a good size, and it's also a flip up screen, so it doesn't articulate very much, but you can use it for lower level shots, but it's not really good for high shots because you can't, like some you can articulate and point downwards, but you can flip it that way for a little selfie as well. Obviously, as a content creator on YouTube, I do a lot of hiking, wild camping videos, and what I miss sometimes if I'm just taking my action cameras is the ability to zoom in to wildlife and other places. Action cameras tend to have very wide fields of view, and they're not, they've got some digital zoom on them, but it's not really much crop. So this camera does shoot 4K footage that is taken from the whole of the sensor, so it's actually really pretty good given its size. And so you have a 4K camera capable of 24 to 720mm of zoom in, so it's a perfect camera to get out and do little wildlife shots. It does have microphones. I believe they're located on the top, little stereo microphones, but the sound quality is pretty poor. We'll cut to a quick clip of me on top of Cribin, a 795 meter mountain, I think, where I do a little bit of a test, and you can hear it sounds a bit like I'm in a tin tub of some description, and any hint of wind noise just completely destroys the audio as well. And there is no audio input, so you can't put an external mic onto this camera. We'll do a little mic test just to see how it picks up any sound. Bit of breeze up here, but not even substantial, so just see if it is any good at a pinch for a quick selfie shot. Having said that, at an absolute pinch, you can use the selfie camera and record a little bit of a vlog if you want to, as long as there's no wind and not too much background noise. But as a B-roll camera, so if you're up in the mountains, you're just taking footage just to put in the background and you can have music over it, it's absolutely perfect for that, because unless it's a really still day, the wind noise is going to be really, really atrocious from footage you take on this camera. So I do find that I'm putting a bit more background music on my videos to counteract that. But given the size of this camera, not much bigger than a small action camera, you really do get a lot of flexibility with it for footage. So I'm showing sample clips throughout of little bits of wildlife I've taken on with this camera. And it's just been brilliant, because ordinarily I would perhaps see those things out on a long hike. I'd have my action camera and just no way I can really capture them. With this camera, at least you've got a shot. And the autofocus on video is pretty good. And you can do some basic transitions as well. So you can use the screen, and it is a touch screen when you're focusing as well. So if you're in video mode and you can touch it here and it'll focus on whatever's at that point. So say you had a trig point and you just tapped on that, it would focus onto the trig point. You can then tap elsewhere on the screen and then focus into the background. So you can do little focus transitions on that using the screen as well. Whilst a small sensor is in many ways the camera's biggest weakness, it's also its biggest strength, because it's what allows it to be so small. It's what allows it to have such an amazing zoom range, because if you wanted to have that zoom range on a bigger sensor camera, the whole thing gets a lot bigger and a lot heavier. So the smaller the camera, the smaller the accessory. So the batteries are really small, so you can cram a few of those into your pocket, and other things like a tripod. This is my Siri mini tripod that I use all the time because it extends, it's got tripod legs, it's got a decent ball head as well. So this is absolutely perfect for putting action cameras on or small cameras, and it is absolutely perfect for this. And because I don't mind taking this hike and I've always got it with me, you can pop it onto a tripod and actually get some really good steady shots. This does have some minor stabilization built in, but it's not that brilliant. But if you put it through your editing program and stabilize in there, a lot of the footage on my samples that I'm putting on the background are actually just handheld. So I found even at 720mm, you can handhold it as long as it's not too windy and you've got stable. But if you can find like a fence post or a fence to rest on, or it's well worth getting the tripod out, you can get some really nice long distance footage with this camera. In terms of the photos taken, obviously you can shoot raw, but there's also loads of auto settings as well. So you can set it to scene or auto, and it will kind of pick up what kind of scene you kind of take a photo of, and it will set it up with all the various settings that you might need. It does have long exposure modes and is fully manual settings as well. You don't have very many control dials, but you can, use it in quite a sophisticated way. The only thing it's missing from other Sony cameras that shoot video, especially 4K, is picture profiles. It doesn't have any picture profiles, which is slightly frustrating, because as a tiny little camera, if you could set the picture profiles, then you could make it match up to some of your bigger Sony cameras. So for example, the video I'm shooting now is on my A7 II, a full frame camera with picture profiles. If this one had the same profiles, which some of the smaller cameras do, you would get roughly, you know, the same kind of colours and look and feel of it. So if you had a video with both cameras being used, it would look like it was shot on the same camera. Now, serious people about film will say that this is no good for film because you can't put ND filters on it. So if you're out on a bright day, you can't slow the shutter speed enough to get that kind of cinematic motion at 24 frames a second, or you need a shutter of about 1 in 50. But to be honest, you know, I'm a pretty casual video maker. I'm trying to improve all the time, but I find that the advantage of actually the shots you can get with this versus the fact you can't have perhaps that really cinematic looking footage, the pros outweigh the cons there for me. So yeah, the lack of an ND filter might be slightly frustrating for some, but I think for the kind of stuff I use it for, just the long hikes and stuff, it's just about capturing the image. It's not always about absolute quality. But having said that, the 4K does it really nice in good lighting conditions, and when you're uploading to YouTube anyway, even at 4K, it is going to get compressed anyway. So the difference between this and full frame cameras and 1-inch sensors and APS-C and stuff is going to be reduced further down if you're solely using YouTube. If you're actually making videos and watching them at home on your own computer or streaming through your TV and you've got a 4K TV, yeah, you probably wouldn't notice the difference because you're getting the absolute best quality you can. It's not being compressed online. You can shoot this in NTSC or PAL. Obviously I have it set to NTSC for that 24 frames a second, and then that matches up with my other cameras, but it can shoot 30 frames a second at 4K as well. And it's actually got some interesting high frame rates at lower resolutions, so it can shoot, I think it's 100 or 120 frames a second at 1080p, so full HD, and obviously you can use that sparingly and upscale to 4K in your editing program. If you like the idea of a super zoom camera like this, but you want a bit of a bigger sensor, there is an option for you, another camera which I've owned for a long time and used an awful lot on hiking, and that is the Sony RX10 IV, which has a 24 to 600 zoom range, a slightly smaller zoom range than this, but it has a 1-inch type sensor, so the image quality, dynamic range, usability and lower light is going to be a lot better than this camera. It's also got extremely amazing autofocus, high frame rates. It will shoot 20 frames a second in photo mode. It does it all. But the reason why I'm actually switching the RX10 for the HX99 is this. The size of the cameras. 246 grams versus just over a kilo. The weight in your hand is really significant, and the weight over the course of the day is even more significant. And because it's much bigger, if you're going to use this with a tripod, which you really need to if you're shooting at long range using the full zoom, you've got to have a much bigger tripod. It won't sit on that small tripod very well at all. It'll often just look like it's going to keel over because as soon as you start zooming in and the weight of the lens changes, it doesn't balance well at all. So everything about this camera is bigger accessories needed, bigger batteries, just heavier. And if you're hiking a long way, over the course of the day with a shoulder bag, this is just going to really be felt. You're going to have a sore neck and sore shoulders, I know, because I've lugged it many miles. Whereas this camera, it's just, you just don't notice it. So yes, if you want better image quality, but still with the same zoom range and convenience, better autofocus, all that kind of stuff, you can go for the RX10 IV. But if you can make the sacrifices of some of those features and some of that kind of better image quality, then you can take this camera anywhere at pretty much a quarter or less than a quarter of the weight. And obviously the size difference is absolutely crazy. I did a different video on the RX10 saying it is pretty much the ultimate hiking camera, and I do stand by that. Although it's just over a kilo, the image quality, the focus system, the 4K footage, everything about this camera is absolutely top drawer. That 1-inch type sensor really does everything pretty well. It can handle low light much better than a small sensor camera like the HX99. It has better dynamic range. It really is a kind of jack of all trades that borrows a lot of really good tech from Sony's best cameras. However, it is getting on a bit in age, and I've been finding that I'm just not taking it out on those long hikes. When it comes to the weight, the size of the bag, the size of the accessory you need if you're going to tripod mount it, I just haven't been taking it. So despite all of the sacrifices that you make picking up the HX99, I just come back to the fact that I will always take this on a walk. I will have to really feel like I'm going to see something to take this on a walk. I've taken this on long mountain hikes before, purely kind of wildlife, because I have a full frame camera for landscape, which is night and day difference in terms of dynamic range and all the rest of it. So often I'd walk maybe 15, 20, 25 miles and not use this camera because I haven't seen anything. Haven't seen any distant views I want to capture, haven't seen any wildlife, or I've seen wildlife but it's flown up before I've even got the camera out. So I just wasn't taking this camera out much. So the best camera you can possibly have is the one that's on you. So this is always going to be on me. Sadly, this one, I just, I can't justify taking it all the time. However, I do miss, or I'm going to miss, that little 1-inch sensor in a relatively compact package. So I decided to not just switch this camera for HX99, I thought I'd get a second camera to complement it, and that is the Sony RX0 II camera, which is just an amazingly cool bit of kit, and actually has pretty much the same 1-inch sensor as the RX10 crammed into this tiny little body. Now the benefit of this over my other cameras, it is a rugged camera, so it is waterproof to about 10 meters, it's shockproof, drop proof, it's crush proof to 200 kilograms, I think it's like 400 newton meters of pressure it can take. It is an extremely cool little device. It's got a nice little screen which you can flip up for selfies or doing little vlogs, or you can have it out so you can do low shots, or you can flip it the other way and do high shots. It's just an amazingly cool little camera, and the benefit is it's got that little 1-inch type sensor. It shoots really, really beautiful 4K footage. It's got a 24mm fixed f4 Zeus lens, and it's got all your standard picture profiles. Only 15 megapixels, but the photos come out of this little device look absolutely amazing. So I have swapped that big camera for a super zoom HX99 and a rugged waterproof little 24mm RX0 Mark II. So yes, people might think that's a crazy idea, but these two little cameras offer me so much in two little tiny packages, and especially the fact that one of them is weatherproof, so I can take this anywhere, up mountains, in swimming pools, whatever I want to do with it, and it's always going to be there, and you can just chuck it in your pocket because you've got to worry about damaging it. And then this one here, I always have it on me. Anything I see when I'm out and about, wildlife wise, hopefully a bit of capture with this one. And yes, the autofocus isn't particularly amazing for wildlife, but then most of the time the wildlife has disappeared before you can get your camera anyway. But I have had a lot of luck with this camera so far. I've had some really nice wildlife footage to kind of stick into my hiking videos and stuff, so I've been really pleased with it. Anyway, if you own any of the HX series, or you've even got an RX0 or an RX0 Mark II, let me know in the comments. If you think I'm mad for exchanging my RX10 IV for these two cameras, let me know in the comments. And if you've got any alternatives that you want to recommend to people, then chuck them in the comments. Anyway, hope this video has been helpful to you if you are looking for a lightweight hiking camera with a super zoom function, because that is what that's all about. And if you are interested in the rugged RX0 II, when I've had a bit more use of it, when I've had a bit more experience playing with it, I will do a little video on that as well. So as ever, a huge thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.